everyone to another Design Ops Alive podcast. I am welcomed by a very special guest and a very bubbly guest by the name of Hannah Knowles. Hannah is a very vocal person on LinkedIn. If you have not come across her profile, she is very knowledgeable in the UX research field. And I have brought her onto the show today to really talk about the challenges in being a freelance UX researcher, which is, in my opinion, triple the amount of effort in being a freelancer than a designer. So I think the challenges that come with it are enormous. And I brought her onto the show to really talk about this in detail, how she has built her business, how she's built herself, and looking forward to what she brings. Welcome, Hannah.
Hello. Oh, do you know what? I'm really pleased that I'm just going to dive straight in, but I'm so pleased that you said it's so much harder than being a designer because being a researcher has always been like the unloved brother and sister of design.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I found it really hard to do that transition, and we will go into it, but like, I've been a researcher for 11 years. I hate giving away any age because I like pretend I'm 24, obviously. Like, I'm definitely not. But when I was younger too, like I didn't even know UX research existed. Like it wasn't even a career I'd heard of. Like when I was a student, I studied, which people know, I did a post about it yesterday, but I really wanted to be a fashion designer. Then I was like, oh, now I want to be an architect. Then I'm like, oh, I want to be a garden designer. And just like going out in the rain. But I was like, but that was a career choice at some point.
Wait,
Just,
hold it. Did you just say a garden designer? Yeah?
yeah,
Oh, wow.
a landscape designer looked really cool. And
Landscape designer. Okay, all right. I get that because landscape designing is amazing. I actually do love that. So,
yeah, no,
yeah.
Jill knows nothing about plants. I'm like, hun, I can't keep a plant alive inside. Like, no one wants me doing that garden design. And I just, yeah, it was bad. And then I just like fell into research. I always say researchers fall into research. They don't really know they're going to be a researcher. But I think the thing I always loved, or always loved throughout my like full even education was I was obsessed with like people in research, and I just loved going through and thinking about how does somebody interact with a product, or how are they like touching things. I used to spend hours, oh, this is really sad, but I would spend hours doing in-depth research on different types of wood when I studied furniture design, and they were like, so you have a problem. And I'm like, it's probably called autism. And so we'll get that diagnosed. And you're like, you know what? Like, I was really bad at furniture design, and I really bad at furniture design. They were like, this isn't for you. But they were like, what is for you is research. Like, you're really great at this side of it. I used to love taking videos of people sitting in chairs. I was that weirdo who was like doing it anyway. And I didn't even know it was like a thing. And they were like, oh, that's an actual career. And I was like, this for a living. And I felt really blessed and lucky that I had an education path like that led us into research. So even though I'm not like a psychologist, I'm not trained, I don't have a PhD, that field didn't interest me as much. I came into research through like design route. But then when I became a researcher, I've learned very quickly, like everyone wants the cool party of design. No one really wants the research. So I just, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm really such an advocate of like trying to get people to love research as much as they love design, because without it, they'll not have cool products in the world. And that's what I want people to understand.
absolutely.
God.
Absolutely. Yeah. You really hit the nail on the head with that introduction because you started off mentioning that research is always looked as the bad, what did you say, bad sister or bad
Yeah,
brother
like the
within the UX
unloved. They're
field? Or
just unloved.
the
No one
unloved,
wants
sorry, the
them.
unloved, yeah. But this is where I think you just mentioned also one of the key things. Without research, the design really doesn't perform as great as designers want it to be. And I think researchers, and this is my opinion before we start to dig in, I think researchers are the ones that bring the most value to the design field. I think what UX designers don't realize is that in the design field, 80% is the scientific. I'm talking about the UX side. I'm not talking about UI design. Specifically talking about UX. 80% is the storytelling, the collecting of data to base your design decisions, negotiating with stakeholders, and 10%, I would say 10-15% is the actual design, and 5% is really utilizing the research data and then giving yourself a benchmark or KPI to measure if your designs have made an impact. So I really wish that people don't look at research as the unloved one.
It is, I think, like for me, like especially because I would call myself a product researcher. So super into product teams. I usually work in product teams. So I work alongside design teams. And you've just mentioned like stakeholders. I deal a lot with stakeholders. But my style of research, or definitely the style of research I've developed, is to be like a bit scrappier, to be a little bit faster paced. Because I think when I first joined the research world 11 years ago, we were definitely in this like, oh, let's do strategic research and let's do this. And that doesn't work for product teams always. Like a product team wants an answer like yesterday because they want to build something. And that style like absolutely has its place in the business world. But where it didn't translate well was into product design. And that for me was like this like penny moment of like, oh, I need to change what I'm doing as a researcher. Like, yeah, I might want to do a diary study, or I'm obsessed with ethnographic research, for example, but they do take months. Like in a product team don't have months. They want a product released. So it's like, for me, it was like, okay, how can I take this glorious thing over here and keep all of that rich data, but make it faster for product teams? Because if I don't make it fast for them, they're not interested. They're going to release that product anyway, with or without your research. So you've got to learn how to make it fast. And I think that's one of the biggest things or misconceptions that I definitely work a lot with stakeholders on is, oh, research is slow, or you're slowing me down. And it's like, no, you've maybe just had researchers with different processes, or you've been doing the wrong type of research for what you want. And I think that's a really hard thing to explain to people, of even though I see me as under this umbrella of being a UX researcher, but within that, there's all these little threads of different types of research. And if you're not pulling on the right one, then like it's not going to get used. You're going to be seen as slow, and no one's going to come to you and want something. But I think in terms of like how it fits with design, like design's so subjective. If you aren't designing without research, you're designing for yourself, basically. And I see lots of teams now, lots of even designers have amazing research skills. And I would love it if my designer does usability testing or does that unmoderated research. That's cool. But what I also don't want them to do is like mark their own homework and be like, yeah, cool, everyone loved that feature. And you're like, yeah, because like you ask them the question, do you like this feature? Like, of course they're going to say yes.
Yes, yeah.
Like, it's just getting like into that with a product team of, yeah, you can have your designer do it, or you can have your PM do it. But what you're not having is this unbiased view come in. And that for me is where I want to sit, as this agnostic person to the team. Like, I want to bring in what the business want. I want to bring in what people have. To me, I think where probably UX research has gone a bit wayward, or sometimes it does, is I'm a massive advocate of users, but I also understand a business needs to make money. So sometimes what an individual wants isn't always what the business want, and then we'll have to negotiate on what that looks like. And I think sometimes researchers forget that. Like, it's great, we want to be advocates of people, but we'll also have to make sure that with a business goal, otherwise we're not going to be used. It's like,
but then let me take a stab at this, because I've seen a lot of product managers utilize researchers in the way of just validating ideas.
Absolutely.
What's your take on that? What's your view and opinion on this?
Like they do, they'll always start, was in a product team, or it must be like 3-4 months ago. I joined them when they'd already had this kind of idea of, oh, we're going to build this thing. And they'd already actually built the thing. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to build design. That's just what I love to see. But
Yeah.
it's always going to happen. But then what I always try to do with a team is say, okay, like you've got this idea and your assumptions or even people's like thoughts and where everything comes from is based on something. So I'm always like, how do I get to the root of where that idea is stemmed from? And then prove to
Mm-hmm.
them that either, yeah, that is a good assumption. That does happen in the real world. Actually, a lot of the time, what we're going to try and prove is that doesn't happen in the real world. Because when they have something or we get an idea, it's like this trickle effect of they've heard it from someone who's heard it from someone else, who's heard it from someone else in the business, and it gets passed down to us. And we're like latch onto something, and we're like, no, this is how people behave, and this is what you do. And you're like, oh, it's not the fun. Like they definitely do it on a bus, or they do it in ways that like we didn't even think of. I always go back to basics when I join teams like this. Anyone who works with me will know I'm a little bit obsessed with workshops, and like I will force you into a workshop at least once a week, whether you want to or not. But for me,
Yeah.
that's how I need to break it down. Because the beautiful thing about research, and people seem to forget this, is we have evidence. Like we collect data all the time, so we can bring that
Yeah.
evidence back. So I'll always say to someone, if you think that happens, show me where that is. Show me where that answer is then.
Yes.
Show me the
Yes.
data, because if you can show me you've done that and you really do understand what's going on, then I'll not bother looking into it. If you come with one piddly thing, like you spoke to your mom's mate about it, not going to cut it. Like that's not
Mm-hmm.
research. That's just having a nice
No,
conversation with someone.
absolutely, absolutely, and that is a common thing of product managers where they have just had an epiphany and think it's a good idea. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate with this kind of question. Product managers tend not to use researchers in the beginning due to the time it takes for research to be done. I just had this conversation this other day where businesses don't see the return of investment. And we can delve into that into another topic, or we can delve into that into another show. But what I'm trying to outline is that a lot of product managers skip the research part in the beginning due to time constraints. What would you say to product managers who are listening to this? What would you say to advocate in bringing research, and when is the best time to bring in research, from your opinion?
I mean, before you've built a product, that would be nice. But I join a lot of product teams. This is how I do it with a lot of product teams. I do join product teams who've already got a product in the world. And I've lent into something that comes from an engineering world. But engineers use these things called like spikes. And a spike's where you investigate something in a time-boxed environment. They're all small on something. They spend a couple of days and they come up with a decision. I pitch my discoveries as discovery spikes. So I'm like, right, it's cool. We want to go and test that thing, or we want to build a new feature, but let's add in a 2-day discovery spike. I always find talking a language like that, 2 PMs, works better than I'm going to go run a discovery. The other way that I tend to broach it with teams is, of course, bring it in as soon as you can. But I always say if we can spend 90 to 100 minutes each week on agile ceremonies, and I'm talking things like your daily stand, planning if you work in sprints, that is, or within agile or Kanban.
Yeah.
We can spend that time on ways of working. We can dedicate 90 minutes to one contextual interview a week. Like there's no reason why we can't do that. For me, I always try and break research down into its like smallest format, and I will do it session by session, and that's how I'll pitch it to someone. Because I think it can be really overwhelming when you say to someone, I'm going to run 12 interviews in a week. And I think actually sometimes they kind of panic because they know they're going to get a lot of data back. They know they're going to have a lot of decisions to make. And that's super overwhelming to someone. Like it's overwhelming to us as researchers. So I never, ever, well, I hardly do it now, where I do all my interviews in one go. Like, and that's usually like the traditional way of doing research of you'll block the time out. You would sit with people for like 3-4 days. You would do all the analysis in one go. But actually all that means is that you get a lot of decisions and you need to make a lot of decisions at once. So I try and break it down to say, okay, let's do one interview a week, or let's do one session a week. And they're big sessions. They can be long sessions with people. Or if they're shorter sessions, say, okay, well, we're going to do 2 or 3 shorter sessions a week and make smaller decisions, because I don't think you need to make big decisions from research. They can be those small decisions because small seeds grow into mighty trees. And that's where I try to pitch it to the end of, you don't need it. Like, especially with product teams, like, yes, if I'm on a really sensitive subject or I'm doing something that really does need the statistical viability, I will of course do that. But actually what a lot of product teams are just looking for is, are we going in the right direction? In the nicest way. They don't care about the statistical viability. They just want to know they've put the ship in the right direction and keep it in the right direction. And that's what we can do with super small kind of interviews or doing small sessions with users. If we wait to do that all in one go, and then we come out and we go, actually, that product totally bombed, all you get is, well, why didn't you tell us sooner? And you're like, yeah, why didn't I tell you sooner? So for me,
but that's
it doesn't work anymore. That traditional doing it all in one big go just doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But you mentioned something, because this is something where I'm going to get your opinion about this, because you mentioned like doing a spike, and now a spike normally happens. Well, I mean, if you have good agile practices, normally spikes happen before you start a program incremental delivery. Now, what I'm tending to see is that spikes normally happen during the development and the design phase. Now, I want to get your 2 cents on this. When you've done your research and you find a high level of statistical or statistic liability, man, my knowledge is getting tested here in research. But yeah, when you have a high level of statistical liability, how can you convince product managers to stop once they have committed into a development cycle? And I'm talking a program cycle of like 3 months, yeah? Your research and your design, that's it. This is where I see research struggling, because they're pointing out left, right, and center, if you go down this route, you will not get the impact that you're looking for. And a lot of researchers, and I've worked with great researchers, struggle to put the brakes on product managers. What advice would you give to people in that situation?
I think you have to learn, like, you can't put the brakes on. You like have to accept they're not going to stop developing. They're not going to stop engineering. They're not going to stop designing. They also have a stakeholder breathing down their neck. But what I can do is negotiate with them of, okay, this thing over here doesn't work, but we've got this smaller thing we can fix over here, and let's try that first. And for me, it's all in that compromise, because they're not going to stop what they're doing in the nicest way. Like, we are the smallest fish in the pond for them. And yes, a few people have come back and said it didn't work for them. The way that I always try and picture is, but let's what that few people scaled up looks like. Let's see if that is, 60% of our user base and 60% of them are failing and can't get through. That for me is something that we need to fix. I've been really lucky and worked in a lot of product teams who do take that on board, but I think I've built that up over my career of, I am, as you said, very vocal. I do not back down. But what I've become proficient in is negotiating and learning to take what I found and giving them options. Like, it's not always my job to give options, and I'm not a designer, so I can't design what that looks like. But I'll sit down with the designer and say, what is the smallest thing we could do? And what's the biggest thing we can do? And we can take options back to a PM. I think sometimes what we've become very much, especially in the design world, is like black and white, but there is a grey area in between where we can build up these things or build up these changes to a design. We don't necessarily have to do it all in one go. That's also not great for your engineering team either, to like jump a load of things on their desk that I have to change because they're not thrilled about it either. And because your dev
Mm-hmm.
team, or if you work in a team like this where your engineering is ahead, they've already got loads of work on their desk. So I'm always like, I will be best friends with my engineer and they are the
Mm-hmm.
first person I'm going to get on my side. And I'll say, if we were to do this, what would you propose? And is that critical or actually just doing background work because you don't have anything to pick up? But for me, it's
Mm-hmm.
literally all in that negotiation. Like, I think when I accepted my research is never going to pump the brakes on. It has once. I will say I have stopped a project at its tracks because it
Mm-hmm.
just was never going to work. Everything we tried was failing. It just was a service that people didn't need and they weren't going to do it. And actually they did think, okay, we're not going to put more investment into this. This isn't something we want to go down. We'll just pause it. But a lot of the time,
Yeah.
those services can be manipulated. But again, it's giving people options. People don't like being told what to do in the nicest way.
Yes.
And
Yes,
that's
that's
the
true.
hardest, especially with a PM, because your PM controls the ship that you captain. You want to be that right hand man. And I will say, I want to make you look good. I'm here to make you look good. I'm here for you to have a
Mm-hmm.
successful product. Because if you don't, you're
Yeah.
going to look bad. But what I can do is help you get there in the shortest space possible, because that's what they're always thinking about. So I think having an attitude of like, this needs to stop or I'm going to get this stopped is just unrealistic in a business. Like, and I think
Yeah.
the sooner you learn that as a researcher, the better. Essentially, like that's my advice. Like, just, you're not going to put the brakes on, but you can do these other little things to help get to where you want to be. And it's about understanding that with your stakeholders of actually, is that even important to them at all? Because it's probably not, which is why they're not interested. And if they're not going to pump the brakes onto it, you probably haven't been privy to a conversation that's happened elsewhere and you need to figure out what's driving them so I can drive better research for you to take it on board and to potentially listen a little bit more. So yeah, putting brakes on is always a hard one. And it is. And sometimes
Very,
I'll
very. But this is it. I mean, it's always the case that, and how should I put this in a nice way? You know, the buy-in from product managers to researchers is very hard. You know, it's as I mentioned in the beginning. Whoa, 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 whoa.
technical feedback there. You got a ghost in there.
Can you hear me? Can you
Yeah,
hear me?
yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's back. It's fine now.
Hold on 1 second. Test, test, test. 1, 2, 1, 2.
You good. You good.
Ladies and gentlemen, we just had like the weirdest technical issues. We won't go into details, but something was vibrating. We don't know what it was. Okay, I edited. I'll take that. I'll take that out from the edit. Yeah, we won't add that in. But does she see? This is the good thing. She can't control what I put in or what I don't put in. So, um, no, ladies and gentlemen, we just had a really a weird technical issue. My headphones went really crazy. Now I've got my work headphones, so I might look a bit silly with this one that you got here,
Enjoy
like
it.
with this little,
Enjoy it.
yeah, yeah. But let's get
Yeah.
back to this. Let's get back onto this. So, Hannah, I think my question was going around the whole thing about getting buy-ins from product managers. And I think that, even if you have a dedicated researcher inside of teams, the buy-in just to get researchers involved is so hard. So as a freelancer, I
Yeah.
imagine that must be just like
Brutal.
astronomical. Yeah. In getting buy-ins from companies that you're not even embedded into. So how do you even go about this, Hannah?
So I work predominantly in public sector services. For anyone out there, you'll know I love public sector research. I love public sector services. Predominantly, I like health services. I'll never be a doctor. I'm definitely not smart enough to be a doctor. But the thing I always look for is if people are looking for design, I'll always start the conversation of, oh, so what are you basing that design off? I'm very lucky where I know quite a few people, so I have those conversations. But for me, it is building up trust over a long period of time. And I don't know freelancer wants to hear that because they're like, I'm going to freelance tomorrow. And you're like, oh, you've got no clients. All like, and you need to do that. But it's like maybe like that people person aspect for me. So me as a freelancer, I came from full time. So I started my life as a junior researcher, had zero training, and then moved up in the world. And I went to work for huge technology company called. We did not love each other. Let's put it that way. So I left very swiftly from and moved back. Well, I actually started contracting. I decided to take the leap a few years ago, and I was like, quit on the day. And they're like, what are you going to do? And I was like, contract maybe. I'll try that world. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a job. And then contracting just didn't love me either, or I didn't love contracting because I still felt like those constraints of working to somebody else's kind of business. I had to deal with all of the things that you deal with as a normal researcher, and you don't always get that freedom to do what you want. But the way I try to go about work is start from the bottom with those designers. So I'll always make good friends with designers. I will always try and hit up the person who is paying the bill rather than the person who is making some of the other decisions, because I need to know what they want out of it. And the way I approach it, if somebody comes to me, and I do have people come to us and say, I want you to do testing. That's the first thing I hear out of people's mouths.
Yeah.
Got this idea and I want you to test it. And I'm like, okay, well, let's get on a call and we'll talk through it. And I'll talk them through what all their different options are. A lot of the time, people don't need something tested like at all. But that's the language that they're used to hearing. That's something that they're comfortable with. And I will always have a little bit of it in to say, okay, we'll do this other study and we'll bring some testing in. But as a freelancer, this year's been brutal. I'm not going to lie. My biggest issue this year has definitely been cash flow. Also getting to pay you on time is a problem.
Yeah.
But trying to get those projects has definitely become much harder than what it used to be. And I think that's purely because also you have to understand as a freelancer, they're doing more with less money. So my thing to them is, if you're even trying to build a business case, if you Googled how to write a business case right now, there'd be a section in there which is, well, tell us who your users are. Tell us what you're going to tell me what the problem is. Tell me how you're going to fix it. And I'm like, I can help you do that, even if it's through secondary research and I'm not necessarily doing first-hand research. I can do that quicker than you ever could. So yes, you might be paying me something on the outset, but I was trying to get in with those small, super startups who are really just looking at ideas. And I tend to do that through networking. Not everyone loves networking. Yeah. Unfortunately, you have to as a freelancer. And if you're not a cool person like me, maybe it's not for you. If you don't like people, I probably wouldn't do it. And I think that's just having the reality of it, of you are not going to, I mean, some people do. And I'm like, how did you do this? But you're not going to become a freelancer instantly and get a project tomorrow. That's just unrealistic. Yeah. What you have to do is think about what are the small things you could do and sell. So I started off just by selling mentoring. I'm not a good mentor, by the way, so don't hit me up for that. You do not want me for that. I am not a good mentor. I wouldn't do that. I cannot help you with those career steps. But what I can help people with is that background research, is figuring out, is there really a market for this? Is there something I do really small for someone? So I started off then by doing consultation calls, and that was on top of contracting. So I had these calls. I still have these calls. They're £99. You come to me with one problem and I will give you one solution by the end of that call around research. And by giving people these little nuggets, it helps them build trust with me as a person. And if somebody doesn't need research, I will tell them you don't need me. I'm not going to gouge somebody's eyes out just because the market's bad and because I want money. I mean, I do have bills.
I love that.
That would be nice, but you've got to be honest.
The content? Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram for more updates. Your support helps us bring you even more great content. Now let's get back to our podcast.
Yep, I love that. I really love that. That is such a good statement you just said there. Like, I will be honest with you and tell you, you do not need research.
Absolutely. There are so many things that don't need research. And like, that's where that whole thing of, if somebody comes to us and say they need to test something, and they're basically testing a UI. I'm like, you don't need to test a UI sometimes in the nicest way. Like, it's aesthetics, it's personal. Somebody isn't going to like the color blue, but that's not going to stop them from buying your product. There are much other things to fix that's making somebody not buy that product. But if somebody's not ready to do that, like, I will never, ever take on a project if I don't think somebody's ready to do that, or if they're a little bit muddled. I would rather help somebody figure out what they want from research. And if that's my job as a freelancer, that's why I have that call to say, well, let's figure out if you even need it at all, because people go off and spend hundreds of thousands thinking that research is going to fix their problems. Research is going to bring you more problems to the party, and that's what you've got to be kind of prepared for. And if somebody isn't prepared for that, and they don't have the resources to do that, then actually maybe you don't want to open that can of worms right now. Maybe there's something different you could spend that resource and time on, and come back to me, and we'll have another conversation in 6 months' time, and we'll see if you're ready then, because that's more important to me. That relationship with an organization than, someone wants to pay me money right now, because it's just not cool. It makes us icky that people do that. And like, that's not the sort of person like I am as a human. And I don't want that to be the business that I have either. And hopefully one day I'll be able to scale and hire people. And I would want them to have that same mentality of, those consultation calls aren't for me to get requirements and upsell you. It's for me to figure out whether you're ready. And if you're not ready, I have no shame in telling someone.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I love that. And I think that's such a good ethic to work with, because you're not, as you mentioned, you've got kids, you got to put food on the table,
Absolutely.
But I'm proud to even bring you on the show and for you to even mention that, because for somebody who has kids and you need to put food on the table, you take the higher approach of, I'm not here to just grab money out of you. I'm here to build a relationship with you and to assist you. And amazing, absolutely amazing. Now, I've got your CV here. So,
well, I was just going to say, the thing for me is like, that person could be the next Amazon. There could be just like, because they're right now, potentially doesn't work. Doesn't mean their idea 6 ideas down the line isn't the next big thing. And if it is the next big thing, I want you to pick me to work on that. Like, and I think the thing for me with people of, like, I couldn't tell you how many businesses I've had and failed, like, as ideas. Like, everyone does it. You go through the phases. One point I had a bun-in shop on Etsy. Let's not talk about that, because I realized that my selling was all on there and I had no value from it. But I learned all these different things along the way. But the thing that I learned the most was, like, and people will always say this, people buy from people, but they do. And that's how I get a lot of my business, because people are like, oh, you need this woman, she's great. Go speak to her, she's just fun. She'll bring some fun to the party. I'd rather have that than, oh, this woman gouged my eyes out. And people are doing it on bootstrapping. Like, I started the business I have now bootstrapping. Like, I took a loan out, and I understand what it's like to spend that money and figure out where to spend that money. And you like a website builder. This is no offense to website builders, but will take your money and run, because they don't, in the nicest way, think about what comes with it. And yes, you might need money. And if you're a designer out there, I love you all, but just stop taking designs on for people and think about realistically, could they spend their resource better somewhere else? And I think that's what I always want to be for someone, is a sounding board, like this agnostic sounding board for people of, I might not have loads of business acumen, but what you can have with is an honest conversation. I will tell you honestly what I think you need from a research and design perspective, because I see a lot of people being freelance or consultants now, and they maybe haven't quite come into this world with that same ethical background. And I totally
Yeah.
appreciate
Yeah.
their first sale. Everyone wants their first sale, but that first sale is just as important as your last sale. And how you stop
Absolutely.
selling is the most important thing. Like, set those boundaries, set your bar. And if a piece of work comes in and it doesn't meld with you, don't take it. Like, you don't have to. Like, and I know you become like, I don't want to say desperate, but there's things that like, I know I won't work with. Like, I don't do gambling because I don't believe in it. And there's even part of finance that I'm like, and maybe, like loan companies, or there's things that I'm like, I don't want to research on that because they don't meld with me morally. And I think finding that for you, and of course, there will be people out there who love working on those sorts of industries, and that's great. But I will always tell somebody like, that's not my ball game. But there's someone over here who loves doing that piece of work, because if I don't love it too, that will come across, and I don't want that.
Absolutely.
Either.
Yeah, you're absolutely. I think ethics, you got to have ethics. And I think if you have a business or you are a freelancer, you do have to have ethics. And, we've done the same thing with Design Ops Online. We've only been, we've only been in the market since, end of July now? It's coming up end of July. And everyone thinks that we're making loads of money. But, we're very honest. We're like,
just £1, just like that.
That'll be like the biggest target for us, because, everyone thinks we've got loads of clients, and I'm like, and my colleagues who deal with that side of the business, they do, as you mentioned, operate with good ethics. So, we don't go into a company and say, hey, you need design ops when you're just not ready. It's like, there's a certain maturity of taking a design ops and research ops, because we also do research ops. So I think in this business of freelancing or just generally, if you want to start a business, you've got to have ethics. I'm pretty glad that I'm not involved in the business development no more. I'm just solely focused on podcasts. So I'm just like, just focusing here, and I'm just doing my thing here while they're doing all the hard work, and they're probably going to tell me to edit that in the final bit, but I'm going to keep it in. I want to circle back. And I'm sorry, I was mentioning I do have your CV. And it killed my printer. I don't know what happened.
That lovely purple at the top. Did not enjoy.
No, I didn't enjoy that at all. I don't know what happened there.
Probably pink.
Is it pink or is it purple?
I don't know. I can't remember. Not gonna lie.
Okay.
Not important. We've digressed.
Okay. Well, one of the key things I saw on your you mentioned your services in your CV, and you mentioned about workshops. I wanted to get your two sentences on that, because a lot of researchers who I see that I do freelancing don't offer that. They offer that they will do a workshop, or they will gather the data, or they will do infinity mapping, and they break down those kind of little services as part of their packages. But this one really sparked my interest. I wanted you to give me some details, like, what is this workshops package that you give?
Yeah, so workshops are workshopception. But I do a lot of workshops for on research methods. I am a total nerd, like a massive nerd. Like, I can't read a book. Give me a white paper and I will love you forever. Like, I love reading papers. I love reading what other people are up to in terms of research. I don't know why. That's just what my mind enjoys to read. But I go into companies and I will run workshops on how to deliver good workshops with your team. For me, workshops are fundamental working as a product team. I don't want to be in a meeting. If I have a meeting, there's usually a hierarchy involved. There's usually somebody in the room who has the loudest voice. And unfortunately, when you work how we do now, which is remote, the loudest voice always wins, and the loudest voice isn't the most important. But what I do is I will sit down with a team or with a product or an organization, and I'll work out with them, okay, what are you doing right now? What isn't coming out of meetings? A lot of the time, when you have a meeting, you don't make decisions. You tend to feel around in conversation with each other, and what doesn't come out of it is an action. So what I looked at throughout my life was, how do I best get that out of people? And actually research methods align really well to this. We have so many tools in our ammo that we could use and repurpose elsewhere. So what I tend to teach people in these workshops is how to take those research methods and repurpose them for agile ceremonies. So if I say do something like sprint planning, so sprint planning, for those of you who don't know, is where we all sit in a room together. We think about what we're going to try to deliver over the next 2 weeks. But what I see is your engineering team will come with one thing, your UCD team will come with something else, and they won't meld together. We don't have a goal. We don't have a vision. We're working on totally different things. But researchers have the tools to tell you how to do that, or at least bring that together in a little bit of a way. Things I use in sessions with people all the time. So we'll use things like card sorts a lot as researchers. We'll use things like tree testing. I repurpose all of them, but make them fit so a product team can get decisions out of them. And that's what I teach people, is how to do that. It's hard. Don't get me wrong. Not all of them work.
Yeah.
Some of them are very specific and I'll fix very specific problems. So I've recently been trying to develop a set of method cards that are like free. They're going to be free to people, but I've got people testing them and they give us feedback. Some of them bomb, and I mean, they really do. Some of them are like, that was such a specific problem that like I've had with teams that it doesn't translate, and they're like, actually it didn't work. But I love that. Like, I don't love somebody telling us something doesn't work, because I'm like, I can do it. But for me, workshops are literally the crux of every product team. I refuse to go to meetings now. I'm like, if you're running a meeting without a goal or purpose, I am not coming to that meeting. And I will tell them how they can run that meeting better, and I will give them tools, but I will never join a meeting if it doesn't have an agenda, if it's not broken down, and it doesn't have an actual purpose to it. Because for me, activities, especially like what we do in research sessions, so we break a session down, we think about what we're trying to find out, and we match activities to find that. Meetings or workshops should be exactly the same. If as a team, we are trying to find a decision over here, we should match what we are doing or what we're doing as a team to do that. I think this kind of was born out of the fact we use like a lot of collaboration tools. I couldn't tell you how many times I've joined a meeting and somebody's just opened a whiteboard and thought that's going to fix their problem. Like, just because you have Miro or Figma doesn't mean people are going to engage together. You physically have to create that environment. So for me, that's why having these like workshop methods works really well, because having little activities and goals means you've got an ending, means you come out of something feeling accomplished. And if I can have a team every single day feeling like they're accomplishing something, they're going to love their researcher, because I'm helping them to feel good and to make progress. Like, for me, I think this has been like maybe more of a new thing when you're like new life, new year, and new year. But like the thing that really stuck in my mind, especially this fits with product teams, is it's about progress, not perfection. So as long as we're progressing and we are making little baby steps, and we can do that through workshops, and we can do that through making really small decisions, in 6 months' time, you are going to have an amazing product at the end of it. If we just sit on Teams together all day and you just open a board and ask me what I want, I'm never going to be able to tell you that, because it's starting from a blank canvas. But I think that's where probably researchers could repurpose themselves in product teams. So if your team doesn't potentially want to do research, or they don't maybe see your value, make your own value through this, through helping them make decisions. Because that, for me, the biggest value a researcher can bring is you can be that person to help drive decisions, and your team will love you forever for helping them do that, more than bringing research to the party.
So Hannah, with your last statement, I'm going to do a bit of product placement, because this is something that we also do in Design Ops, where we try and promote sustainable design methods, or sustainable design methodologies. And the thing you just mentioned about having agendas and having some form of structure, even on meetings, cuts down the amount of waste even workshops where there is no plan, and there's no setup, and there's no structure in getting an outcome of it. Again, it's wasted design. So this is practices we always try and preach in businesses when we go in with our design ops. And mainly research ops is the one who pitch it the most, our research ops teams. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Hannah, before we wrap up the show, and we're now coming to the end, I think I wanted to get your 2 cents on, if people are listening to this podcast, and we are advertising this podcast on the struggles of being not struggles, I would say the challenges that come with being a UX research freelancer.
Yeah.
What would you say to people who want to come to this field? I know they're going to be your competition. I know that, the market is tough at the moment, but a lot of people that are in the freelance field are mainly in the design. But what would you say to people that do want to come into this?
Like, find your own style. Like, that for me has been the biggest journey for me, from especially working from full time as a freelancer. I know I mentioned it at the beginning that I've kind of found this style of being a product researcher, and that's how I sell myself. But find your style of research and lean into the things that come naturally to you. Like, not everyone will love methods as much as I do. Not everyone will be good at the things that I'm at. And I always say to people, like, you're totally right, they're competition, but they're not competition to me, because I'm a specialist in what I do. They can be a specialist in what they do, and they'll bring something totally different to the party. So being bold and finding what that style of research is and what you can sell is more important than thinking about, is this going to sell to the market? What I always learned, or I guess what I was taught when I was wanting to become a freelancer, was there's always going to be somebody to buy off you. And there is, it's finding them, but it's being bold with who you are as a person and understanding your style so well that that somebody can't rip off your craft, basically. Like, you can give somebody processes, because people will always say, like, even with the method cards, like, why give them away for free? Because I'm like, so I know even giving that away for free, they can't deliver it as well as I could in a workshop. So I can give them the tools and the processes, but they're never going to be able to do it as well as I could do it for them. Like, I can still get them it quicker. They can have that for free, because actually the thing itself is free anyway. Like, they can probably go and figure it out for themselves just on a longer time frame. But like, being a researcher might not be the sexiest career choice for people, and it isn't, and it is this kind of unloved kind of market. But I think for me, like, just start the conversation with yourself of, what do I want to be? Can I get that on a different career path? And if not, freelance could be the choice for you. But think about really what it is you're selling and what your unique skill set is. And people always say that, like, oh, what's your unique skill set? What's your UPS? But I think it took me a while to, like, figure out, like, that was, like, the truth. Like, because you hear it from people, like, later on in business about it. But I think for me, it was all about just honing in on my craft and being like, I'm really good at these things, and that's all I'm going to sell. I'm not going to sell these other things, like mentoring, like these other things. Like, yes, they're great, but there's people who are much better at that than I am, and I don't want to be that person. So for me as a freelancer, it was figuring out, how can I do the things that are fun to me? And if that thing isn't fun to me, it got shoved in a little bin, and I was like, well, I'm just not going to do that. Experiment, man. Like, life's supposed to be fun. Like, if I'm going to spend 40, mainly 60 to 80 hours a week doing something, I want it to be fun, and I want it to be all the fun things from my career in life. And I feel blessed now that I can do that. But I've had to come up through that journey of learning the things I don't like doing to figure out the things I do like doing. So for me, it's having that boldness of, no, I am good at this. And yes, there's always going to be better people than you. Like, I learned that very young I have very smart friends. I am not the smartest out my friendship group, but I know, even though I'm not going to be a doctor, they'll also never be a researcher. And it's having that with other researchers. Like, I love listening to other researchers talk. I love people who are specialists in different fields. So find what that specialism is and just go in hard. Go in hard, find it. Find it and do it. Confidence, man. Confidence sells, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. That the statement is worth $1 million in my opinion. Find your style, find your niche, and make it your own and make it fun. That's important. So one second.
Absolutely. Like, all you need is a tiny slice of the pie. Like, I will say that to someone, like, if your industry is worth hundreds of millions, you literally need 0.001% to be successful. So you don't need the full ocean. You need a tiny slice of it. And it's being realistic with that. Like, as a researcher, I know I am not going to be the next Amazon and be worldwide. But what I do know is I can be is be dominant in the market I've picked. So mine's women's health.
Yeah.
That's what I love. That's the market I love to work in. And I can dominate that market because that's what I've loved. That doesn't mean to say there aren't other researchers who are going to be amazing at it too. But hopefully by the time they come into it, I can help them on their path and journey because I will be getting, well, hopefully not spent in my career, but I'll be getting to a point where you move into different phases, isn't it? And that's what it is for me. Like, support someone, especially at the minute when the market is brutal. It's a really hard market. I will support anyone who comes to my inbox or email and is like, I want to do what you do. How do you get there? And it's like, you have to forge that own path. And that's why I say, well, I'm not great at this, but I know this other person who's amazing. So go spend your money on them. Like, they can help you do that. But what I can give you is just an honest opinion of what my journey looked like. So I think, find your niche, roll with it, and it'll come out okay. Do it. Be gold.
Amazing. And, to all the people that are listening to this podcast, we will put a link to Hannah's profile. So if you do want to get in touch with her, I think she's got amazing amounts of experience and knowledge there, which she's willing to share. And really, she's honest. Like, you could just tell from what she's just been saying in this podcast that she is really going to help you or point you in the right direction. And we came across Hannah because of her kind of presence on LinkedIn, and she's shown time after time what she posts up that she is knowledgeable, and she's been very honest on today's show how she's got there. It has been a hard learning curve, and anyone listening, please reach out to her if you have any kind of questions in this field, if you want some guidance into being a freelancer, because
absolutely, she's more about research method. I will talk research methods until I'm blue in the face. Bring a coffee.
Wait, there is a caveat. She is a Newcastle supporter, so just be aware about this. She is a Newcastle supporter, so but that's
very well at the minute.
No, I think everyone will look past that, because at the end of the day, your knowledge in this field and your expertise in this field. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll definitely bring you back on and see how things have been progressing and in your
world.
Yeah, definitely. I'll see your name everywhere. So then I'll be like, I interviewed her. So, Hannah, absolute pleasure.